The question came out of nowhere, sharp and unsettling, like a crack of thunder on a clear afternoon. The CEO's voice, calm but heavy with confusion, cut through the quiet office air as he stared at the little girl standing beside the worn-out chair. "Why does your daughter look like me?" And in that moment, time seemed to freeze, the sunlight spilling through the glass windows casting long shadows that felt heavier than the truth waiting to be spoken. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that can change hearts, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Tales. Your support helps these powerful stories reach more people who need them. The man standing before the CEO was named Arman Qureshi, a single father whose life had been shaped by quiet sacrifices and unseen battles. His clothes were clean but faded, his posture straight but tired, and his eyes carried the weight of years spent surviving rather than living. Beside him stood his daughter, Meher, a 5-year-old with bright eyes, soft curls, and an innocence that made strangers pause and smile. But today, her presence had sparked something else entirely, something that neither Arman nor the powerful man across the desk had expected. The CEO, Razel Khan, was known for his sharp mind and even sharper instincts. He had built an empire from nothing, rising from poverty with relentless determination. Nothing escaped his notice, especially not the uncanny resemblance between himself and the little girl who now clutched her father's hand. It wasn't just a passing similarity. It was in the eyes, the curve of the smile, even the way she tilted her head when she looked up at him. It was too precise, too haunting to ignore. Arman had come to this towering corporate building for a job interview, one of many he had attended in recent months. Life had not been kind to him since his wife's passing. He had worked odd jobs, taken night shifts, and sacrificed sleep just to make sure Meher never went to bed hungry. Every day was a struggle, but he never complained. His world revolved around his daughter, and her happiness was his only measure of success. That morning had started like any other. He had dressed Meher carefully, tying her hair into 2 small ponytails, making sure her dress was neat. He didn't have anyone to leave her with, so she had come along, as she often did. He had hoped the interview would be quick, maybe even successful. What he didn't expect was for his past to collide so violently with his present. Razel leaned forward, his gaze intense, searching for answers in Arman's silence. The room felt smaller with every passing second. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder, almost accusing. Arman swallowed hard, his fingers tightening slightly around Meher's small hand. He had always known this day might come, but he had never imagined it would happen like this, so sudden, so unavoidable. The story that followed wasn't simple. It wasn't neat or easy to explain. It was layered with pain, sacrifice, and a truth that had been buried for years. 5 years ago, Arman had worked as a driver for a private hospital. It was a modest job, but it paid enough to keep life moving. During that time, he had witnessed countless moments of life and death, joy and heartbreak. But one night changed everything. A powerful businessman had been rushed into the hospital after a serious accident. That man was Razel Khan. The situation had been critical. Razel needed an urgent medical procedure, one that required a rare blood type and immediate intervention. The hospital staff had scrambled, but time was slipping away. Arman, who happened to share the same rare blood type, stepped forward without hesitation. He didn't think about money or recognition. He simply saw a life hanging by a thread and chose to act. What Arman didn't know at the time was that the procedure had complications. In the chaos and urgency, an experimental fertility preservation process had been carried out alongside the emergency treatment. Razel, being unmarried at the time and with no immediate family, had previously signed documents allowing the hospital to preserve his genetic material under extreme conditions. Months later, tragedy struck Arman's life. His wife, Sana, had been diagnosed with a condition that made it impossible for her to conceive naturally. The couple had been devastated. They had dreamed of having a child, of building a family that would fill their small home with laughter. When the hospital offered them a chance through a special program, one that involved assisted fertilization using anonymous donors, they saw it as their only hope. Arman remembered the night they made that decision. Sanaa had been sitting by the window, her eyes filled with tears and hope all at once. They didn't ask many questions. They trusted the process, trusted that life would find a way to be kind to them. And it did. Months later, Meher was born, bringing light into their lives in ways they had never imagined. But happiness was fleeting. Sanaa passed away shortly after Meher's birth due to complications. Arman was left alone, holding a newborn in his arms and a grief that threatened to consume him. He didn't have time to process the loss. He had to survive, for her, for the tiny life that depended entirely on him. Back in the present, standing in that office, Arman finally found his voice. He spoke slowly, each word heavy with truth and memory. He explained everything, the hospital, the emergency, the program, the desperate decision he and his wife had made. He didn't know whose genetic material had been used. He had never asked. To him, Meher was his daughter in every way that mattered. Razel listened, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to something deeper, something almost fragile. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a reality that neither man had anticipated. The child standing before him, the one with his eyes and his features, was connected to him in a way that went beyond coincidence. The silence that followed was profound. It wasn't just about biology or science. It was about responsibility, identity, and the meaning of fatherhood. Razel stood up slowly, walking toward the large window that overlooked the city he had conquered. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain. All his life, he had believed in control, in planning every step. But this was different. This was life reminding him that not everything could be predicted. He turned back, looking at Meher, who was now quietly observing the room, unaware of the storm surrounding her existence. There was no doubt in his mind anymore. But what mattered more was the man standing beside her, the one who had raised her, loved her, protected her through every hardship. Arman braced himself for what might come next. He feared losing everything. He feared that the powerful man in front of him might take his daughter away, claiming a right that biology might grant but life had never earned. But what happened next changed everything. Razel walked back to them, his step steady, his expression softened by something that looked like understanding. He knelt down in front of Meher, meeting her eyes with a gentle smile. In that moment, he wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a powerful figure. He was just a man confronted with an unexpected truth. Then he stood up and looked at Arman, his voice quieter now, filled with a respect that hadn't been there before. He acknowledged what Arman had done, not just years ago in that hospital, but every single day since. He recognized the kind of strength it took to raise a child alone, to love without conditions, to give without expecting anything in return. Arman's reply to the earlier question came back into the room, clearer now, stronger. He had said that a child doesn't belong to the one who shares their face, but to the one who stays when life gets hard, who sacrifices sleep, dreams, and comfort just to see them smile. That fatherhood wasn't about blood, it was about presence. Those words stayed with Razel, echoing in his mind long after they were spoken. Instead of taking something away, Razel chose to give. He offered Arman a position in his company, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect. He promised support, stability, and opportunities that Arman had never imagined. But more importantly, he made it clear that Meher would always remain with the father who had raised her. The days that followed were not without complexity. Relationships had to be redefined, boundaries understood. But something beautiful began to grow, a bond not built on possession, but on mutual respect and shared care for a child who had unknowingly connected two very different